Okay, welcome to our Helping Your Struggling Reader session. I am Karen Bowsey. I'm a Title I reading teacher at Brent. And so I will hand this over to Lori Gare, who will be doing the focus and this session.
Okay, and I'm Lori Gare, the Title I reading teacher at Whitaker. And we are going to discuss those 5 components of reading, which are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Those are all important aspects of reading, and they're hit on in all grades. It's just where your focus lies. And so when we talk about reading in grades 3 through 5, the reading shifts from learning to read to reading to learn. And this shift causes some changes in the way we look at our reading. So instead of relying on read alouds and conversation for vocabulary and comprehension development that we do in the younger grades, students are now expected to focus on that through their own reading. And so even though we use phonics and phonemic awareness when we're decoding multi-syllable words and we're looking at those, it's not as emphasized at this level. So how can parents support that older struggling reader? You want to read to your child. They're never too old for read alouds. Sometimes we think that when they get older and they can read on their own, they don't need us to read aloud to them anymore, and they really do. That reading aloud promotes that fluency and vocabulary development and comprehension that we're working on in school in their classes. So fluency is something that reading is done with automaticity. And that means that it leaves room for the brain to kind of comprehend what it is reading. If we spend too much time decoding, we lose that meaning of what we're reading. And so we emphasize the decoding in the earlier years so that it becomes more automatic and the students can focus on that comprehension in the later years. And fluency shifts also, like in the younger grades, we're focusing on sight words and letters and sounds, and we start to make a shift into reading fluency in phrase or reading in phrases and making it sound like a conversation or more natural. So instead of reading these words spread out as "that dog is big," we would start putting it together into phrases. "That dog is big," and then finally reading it as one big phrase, "that dog is big," and making it sound more natural. So how can you help build that fluency? One of the ways is a paired or buddy reading. You can use any text. The parent or the experienced reader would read first, modeling that good reading, and then the child rereads the same page. And that child's reading should begin to mimic the modeling of the parent. And it should start to sound more natural. And if it doesn't, using phrases like, "Can you read it like this?" and repeating it and trying to get them to say it in the same way or make it sound like talking are common things that we use at school to trigger that. As a child becomes more fluent, with that, you can start alternating pages of the book. So the parent reads one page, the child reads the next. This is where "you read to me, I'll read to you" books come in really handy. This is kind of an example of one. It's like little short fairy tales. And on one side, it's printed so the colors are different. It kind of goes back and forth. And you and the child can read together, alternating ways. And it's kind of a fun way to do that and to practice that reading. Another way to build fluency is readers' theater scripts. And this comes in really handy with expression and making your reading sound like conversation. They have to use their voice instead of their actions to project what's happening. So this is a good place to point out punctuation the author has provided to help with that expression. If you Google readers' theater scripts, there are several sites that you come to. Here's one that I found that was free. Some of them you have to pay for. This one happens to be free. It tells you how many parts are in each play. I also liked this one because it's stories that kids might be familiar with, like Ant and the Grasshopper, or Bad Case of Stripes is a book Big Al is a book. There's Billy Goat Scruff. So there's lots of ones that they might be familiar with or have heard before. And when you click on them, this is kind of what they look like. And you can look at the punctuation and the capitalization and really get them to use that in order to help with their expression. Another is to reread favorite books. That rereading is not a waste of time. We encourage it because it makes the child faster. They're reading, it helps them have confidence, and it helps them read with expression. Listening to audiobooks is another great way to build that fluency. Learning Ally is a site that you can go to. You can browse the audiobooks there. The child can pick and put something on their shelf. And if you click on it on the book, it gives you a synopsis of what's there. It will read the book to them. And many of the books have the words there and it's highlighted as it goes. It's human read. Most kids at Whitaker have this account. If they do not, we can certainly get it for them. You just have to contact your teachers or your child's teacher, and we can certainly get them a login so that they can go to Learning Ally. Watching TV with the subtitles turned on is another way to build fluency. It's really hard to ignore those words that are up there, and you're listening to it as well as watching it and reading it. Having your child read and record a short story is a great way to build fluency. They can record it, they can listen to it, and then they go back and try to make it better. They try to make it sound like talking. And so sometimes that's some motivation for the kids to make it better each time, and it's something that's easily can be erased and then started again. Vocabulary becomes crucial to a child's learning at these upper levels. Students have to be able to comprehend and use general and academic and technical language. If you look at this simple thing that a kid might be asked to do, create a diagram that shows how a plant uses photosynthesis to make food. The child has to understand what a plant is and what food is at the lowest level. Then they have to know also what create means, that means to draw or to make. They have to know what a diagram is or what it looks like. So it's kind of that academic language. And then there's the technical language, photosynthesis. They're probably learning that in science, and that's a very technical term that goes along with that. So there's a lot to that vocabulary and a lot of different levels. So we want to raise the child's level of vocabulary and develop that. One of the best ways to develop it is to use conversation. Make sure you're conversing with your child. Involve them in your conversations. You can ask them, tell me about your day. Tell me about the game you're playing. Discuss books you're reading together. And don't water down your speech. So if you're talking about, big predatory birds, use the word talon. Don't water it down, because that helps with that technical vocabulary as they're getting older and learning about different things. Because remember that we're now focusing on reading to learn. We want them to put their easy words to rest. So give those words like nice and bad and good, kind of put them to bed and help kids come up with other ways to express their thoughts and opinions. So another way to say nice might be kind, or it was delightful, or they were friendly. That's how they were nice. Or instead of just saying good, that you're saying, it's positive or it's wonderful, using those other words to help express themselves. Point out and discuss words that you find interesting as you read with your child. So as you're reading, if you come across a word that's really interesting, you can point that out, whether it's one that you like the way it sounds or the meaning of it or the spelling. And if you don't want to do that, there are lists of interesting words. This author has a big website with 500 fun, cool, and interesting words, and she just lists all these words that you could go and pick out together and go and look in a dictionary and find out some more about them and start using them in your everyday language, trying to use them as much as you can. Grouping or classifying words is another way. The more that we can manipulate words and the more that we can look at how they're the same, how they're different, put them in categories, the better we understand them. So when we're talking about, carrot, peas, and beans, well, they're all vegetables. Rings, bracelets, and necklaces, they're all jewelry. And then you could talk about, well, what's different about them? What makes them the same? What makes them different? And then don't forget to do which doesn't belong. That's always a good thing, is pulling out the one that doesn't fit the category. When you are developing that vocabulary, when you get to the older grades and the technical vocabulary, a lot of times kids will bring home a list of vocabulary words that they have to know, or a list or some words that are bolded in their textbooks that they need to understand and to learn. And one of the common things that we do is we make flashcards and we put the word on the front and the definition on the back. But it's not just necessarily writing the definition on the back. I mentioned that the more we can manipulate and work with these words and look at them in different ways, the better we understand them. So we could draw a picture on the back. So instead of, for a word exciting, instead of just writing a definition, you could have a picture of what it looks like to be excited. You can write synonyms or antonyms for the words, because if you understand how it's different or what the opposite is, you're going to understand what the meaning of that word is. Or exciting is thrilling. And then trying to use the word in a sentence or giving an example of the word. So they are off on an exciting adventure to the zoo. So you want to try to use the word in a sentence where there's some context around it, so it gives meaning. And these are ways that your child will learn the word better and the definition. It'll stick with them. You can always act out words too. Once again, it's maneuvering that word or manipulating that word. So playing charade. What does it look like to scamper or to creep or to be an expert or to be embarrassed? So acting out those words can also help give some context to the child when they're learning those new words. Comprehension, of course, is the ultimate goal of reading. It's what we're working towards. And all those other components build on one another to achieve that comprehension. But the process of comprehension doesn't just happen. It's an interactive process where the reader must analyze the information and make it their own. So if you think about a time when you were reading and thinking about something else, and then all of a sudden you say, oh, wait, I don't know what I've just read. To go back and reread because you missed out on those important details. But so a good reader will recognize this and will go back. But struggling readers oftentimes think that just getting through the words is enough. It's such a struggle. They get to the end like, oh, I'm done. But they have no idea what they read. And they don't know that they don't know what they read. They got through the words and they said the words. And so to them, they're done. So they have to be given those and taught those strategies to help them keep and monitor their own comprehension. So there's a lot of different strategies we can use in order to strengthen that comprehension. One is to make a movie in your mind. In the upper grades, we move away from picture books, so there aren't those illustrations to help support that comprehension. So your students have to create that image. You can do that in practice by having them close their eyes and make it in their mind. They could do a 30-second sketch. They could create their own illustrations for a chapter book. So at the end of each chapter, making an illustration that would go with that chapter. So think about that. I want you to try it. Listen to this poem, close your eyes, and imagine what's happening, or sketch what you see as I read the poem aloud. This poem's called Mouse in Her Room. A mouse in her room woke Miss Dowd, who was frightened and screamed very loud. Then a happy thought hit her. To scare off the critter, she sat up in her bed and meowed. And so you should have been able to make that mental image of maybe a bedroom, seeing a mouse, a bed, someone or something sitting up in the bed. Okay, at the end, we find out that she's meowed, so she's probably a cat there. Seeing that mouse run into the room and putting those things into the sketch. If you're making that movie in your mind, if you're seeing that, we comprehend better when we can make that picture in our mind. You can use graphic novels to help bridge the gap between picture and chapter books. So some kids have a really hard time with that, making those mental pictures. And so there are graphic novels out there that can help do that. Here's one. This is Geronimo Stilton series, which it has a lot of books in it, and many of them are in this graphic novel form, so that there's the pictures and there's still the storyline. They're still going to be doing the reading, but they have the pictures to kind of help them along. There are even nonfiction books that have that graphic novel. So this is a book on the heart, and it talks about and gives life to the different cells in the body and what it looks like. And so it gives them kind of that mental image to help with that comprehension as they're reading this very technical vocabulary. I even came across some from the public library that go to Hamlet and other kind of classics that are in this graphic novel. So if your child is struggling in that area, having those graphic novels, having that picture might help them. When we are comprehending, one of the things is being able to summarize or identifying the main idea. So one thing that we do is stop often, at least every chapter or topic heading, if you're in a nonfiction book, and be able to say a couple of things about what's happened, pulling out what's really important in that section of the book. Making predictions. If you're making predictions or guessing what's going to happen in a story, it's a good way to stay engaged in the text. And this gives a built-in purpose for reading the story. And so using starters like, well, I bet this is going to happen, or I think this, or I predict, those are good starters in order to keep someone engaged in the story. Building background knowledge is another tool that we use for comprehension. So previewing a text activates what we already know about a subject. So asking questions or generating questions before you start reading a book with your child, or looking at their homework with them over a certain topic. So, why is this happening? Why is it important? What would happen if? Just kind of get them thinking about it before they actually dig into the reading will help to provide a platform for them to gain that knowledge or keep that knowledge. Giving a purpose for reading. So when you are with your child and you're talking about making a favorite dessert, well, how do we do this? Let's look at the recipe and read the directions, or looking at directions for a project or a game, or researching and reviewing a product that they're asking for. They'll have to read and understand in order to make or do what it is they want. I use this research and review a product a lot with my son, who always wanted the new shoes or the new game or the new whatever. And I would tell him to go off and research and find out, well, what are the reviews for that product? Or before I buy you an app, you need to read the reviews and be able to tell me about them. Giving him that real reason to read is practicing for that comprehension. Being able to make connections. So comparing or contrasting. So when you read something, how is it like something that happened to you? Or what do you know about the topic? Comparing it to other texts or other shows that they've read, or comparing even within a story. Well, how is this character different than this character, or like that character? Some general things that is good for all ages. Basically, first is to check in with your child's teacher. Make sure that you know what they need to work on. Your child's teacher is kind of that key. They're the ones that are going to be able to give you very specific things that you could work on to help your child. You want to make sure that you devote some time to reading. Make it a routine. You can read aloud, so have a read aloud time. You could have everyone reads their own choice. So during this 15-minute time period, everybody gets something that they want to read, and it's quiet and everybody's reading it, and then you can share about it afterwards. Or you could even have a family book club where everyone's reading the same book, and then you can discuss the book and the character and the ideas within that story. Make sure you allow for your child's interests. Provide a wide array of topics and genres. So we all think about, when we think about reading, most of us think about novels and those things that we have to read for school, but there's lots of other things. There's lots of nonfiction that's out there that's important and that kids are interested in reading about. You can do poetry. Poetry is a great way because it's very short. You can take as much time or as little time on those. It's not something that connects day after day. You could practice, especially like the make a movie in your mind with poems. There's newspapers and magazine articles. I know that my son is not a reader. He really does not like to read for pleasure or for fun. And so in order to get him to practice, I would try to point out magazine articles like for his favorite basketball players, or his, did you see what the baseball team did the other night? And read that article about it, because that's all practicing. Fact books. This was something he really liked too, and a lot of kids do, that they're just like little facts, a picture, and then the fact that's written there. And so they're still practicing that reading. It's just not in huge chunks, and it's not necessarily so overwhelming for those struggling readers. Looking at travel brochures. If you're big travelers and you're going somewhere over the summer or planning a trip, have them investigate either paper brochures or online things that they would like to do or investigate. Cookbooks, we talked about finding that favorite recipe. Catalogs, once again, that using those catalogs for reviews and other things. And finally, comic books. But most importantly, that it's basically, something happened there, that you want to read anything, anytime, and anywhere. So that's your best option for practicing. If you have questions or anything, you can either contact myself or Karen Bowsey at Brent, and we would be happy to get back with you.